Adding transitions to your application and animations could arguably give you a better user experience for your application, especially with the SPA, where you can take advantage of things like CSS3 transitions or jQuery animations. Now, CSS3 transitions would be my preference if we were only using browsers that supported those. And how do you check that out? There's two pages you can go to. One is the caniuse.com, and you can type in transition, or part of that word, and it shows you which browsers actually support those transitions. Anything in the green is supported now, and if there's a vendor prefix required, it shows you that as well. Another place I like to go, and Visual Studio uses this site, is realworldvalidator.com. And if you look in here, we go to the top, you can see it lists all the properties, and it does them in groups. First, without vendor prefixes, what do these support? So let's take a quick look for transition. Now we can see that transitions are supported in version 16, 10, and 12.5 of the middle three browsers, Firefox, IE, and Opera. And without vendor prefixes, it's not supported in those browsers. So that means that if we want to use them without vendor prefixes, we're out of luck with Chrome and Safari. And with IE, we have to wait for IE 10. If we want to use vendor prefixes, if you come down, you'll see the Mozilla one down here. It shows you that support of the vendor prefix. And then we also have WebKit. So it does work in Chrome as well and in Opera, but only with vendor prefixes. So it does work in these browsers, but if you're using IE9 or 8, then you're out of luck. So what's the best choice in this case? I like to use jQuery animations for subtle animations and transitions because then I know it'll work across all my browsers in my SPA. And since my SPA supports different browsers, that's a good option here. I liken transitions and animations in your application to a soccer referee or a football referee. When you're watching those matches, you don't necessarily want to notice those guys in the background, but you do feel better that they are there. You want to focus on the content. And for us, our game, our content, is our CodeCamper SPA. So how do we get a nice animation in our application without making it too overly obtrusive? Well, one way we do that here is just to do a subtle one where we come in for maybe 15 pixels from the right to left. And here we're just doing a easing animation over about a half a second. Could even arguably be less time, go a little bit quicker. And I'm changing the opacity from 0 to 1. So how do we do something like that? If you remember back in the router, we're calling the presenter and we're telling it to do three things when we show this view. One is, what view do you want to show? Second, what's the route for that view? And third, what menu item should be highlighted when that view is in place? And the menu item, if you don't recall, is basically the top menu up here. So when I click on that, I want to change it from being this guy highlighted to this guy over here. So that's how the router calls the presenter, and that module's logic is all wrapped up inside the presenter.js. So over here in the presenter.js, we've got transition to. Its first job is to say, go find the active views. If there's more than one, we've got them. And then we're going to toggle the activity indicator. It just puts up a progress bar just so people know something's going on. And then if there are any active views, which in most of our cases there are, we're going to fade out the transition from that view. And we're using a setting up here called fade out, which is saying fade out over 100 milliseconds. Then we're going to float in from 500 milliseconds for half a second. And we're going to use a swing ease. Now, if you want to add other animations, you can also include jQuery UI. There's more easings in there. jQuery just has a couple out of the box. And we're also going to do an offset of 20 pixels. So we're going to come in from the right from 20 pixels and slide into place over half a second. Okay, so we're going to fade out our active views, and then we're going to reset the views. What that does, if we look into him, is he's going to reset the margins of the views that are not in place and set the opacity to 0, just so we're out of the way. Then we're going to call the entrance theme transition. This is a method where we're going to pass it the view and actually perform the transition in animation. So I'll go to the definition of this with Control B or F12. And here we're saying, go find the view using jQuery, set it CSS for the block to be visible. We're going to add a class. We've created this in our CSS, and we're going to animate from the margin right and left with an opacity of 1. And we're going to use the float in and the ease. So we're setting up our animation so we can ease it into place. And the easing is important because if you don't include the easing, it's going to move from the one point to the other over a linear period of time. And it's not going to look very natural. It's going to be more abrupt. And then finally, we're going to remove the active view class from any views that were already in place. So we're just basically putting one view in place and removing the others and animating it over time. And then we're going to highlight the active view, which is the menu item, and we're going to turn off our progress indicator. And all this happens so fast, you're barely going to see the progress indicator. Let's make it a little slower just so we can see some more things happening. Let's change the fade out to over 1 second, the float in to 1.5, and we'll make the float in from the offsets 120 pixels, just so we can see it a little more abruptly. Here we go with the presenter. Now I'm going to refresh the page. And now we should notice the animations are a little longer and more drawn out. And in my opinion, they're a little too long because they're kind of in the way of the user using the application. So we can see here that you can easily change your animations and make them slide in and do what you need them to do pretty easily, even if you drive down into the detail pages. Now, I don't suggest you keep them at those points, so we're just going to undo those three. And we're going to go back and refresh. And now we can see we have very subtle animations. And if these are even too much popping for you, then what we can do is we can change these out entirely. And we can just go in there and say float in over, effectively, if you make it float in over 0 seconds, basically removes the animation. Now you can see the pop in. And to me, this is faster, but it's not giving you that animation. So if you prefer no animation, you can just turn it off like that. If you want to have a more subtle animation, you can put something in to make it work like this. And this is just one way you can add a little bit of animation to your spa.